Woo! Yay!
Jay.
So on today's show, we have Christelle, obviously, and we have the first person I've ever interviewed with a Wikipedia page, Jay Bakker.
Hello. It needs to be updated, but yeah.
Yes, well, I'm sure we all done. Well, certainly my Wikipedia page seems to be missing at the moment. So, yeah, obviously we'll update the Wikipedia page by adding. Obviously, Jay Bakker was on the Oh No, Not Another Live show in 2020.
Perfect.
Before it was massive. So, Christelle wanted me to start the interview because in the US, I've come to understand that you're a much bigger thing than you are outside the US.
I'd like to believe that, but probably not.
So,
yes, I'm huge in the US.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's like with anybody. I mean, well, we can actually throw away what I was going to ask. Let's ask this question. How do you assess fame and your level of fame? Would you say, where would you put yourself in the fame grading levels? Do you think having a Wikipedia page makes you famous, or how do you consider fame in itself?
I don't really think of fame very often. You know, I mean, I live in a small apartment in Minneapolis, you know, and I run a small church online. I think I have maybe a Wikipedia page because there was a documentary series on the Sundance channel about me, and I've written a few books. So I think there's something and my parents were really famous. And so I think maybe that's why it happened. I mean, it was a surprise to me when I first saw it. So, yeah, I don't think I have a very big level of fame. I mean, I know a lot of pastor friends of mine who are much more popular than I am. And, I mean, I've been blessed. I guess there's some luck and some favor you get with fame, you know, like I've written 3 books rather than just one. I've had friends of mine who I think really probably could have written better books and never got the chance to. So there's definitely some privilege that comes along with it. But there's also my parents were infamous more than famous, you know, after their fall. So that was a tough road to go down. You know, I mean, my father was in prison for 5 years. You know, I got in a lot of fights in high school and things like that. So, you know, because people would make fun of my family and say horrible things. And so I guess it's, you know, it's like anything else, there's good and there's bad, you know, that comes along with it. And, you know, but right now I just feel like a normal bloke, to use a UK word. My best friend's Northern Irish from Northern Ireland, from Belfast. So, so yeah.
So wait. Well,
go ahead, Tim.
I'll let Christelle.
So Tim brought up something interesting with the fame. America has heard things about you. UK may have heard things about you, but I'm more interested in knowing who you are as a person, Jay. If you were to tell your own story and who you are, describe yourself to us, Jay.
You know, about 2 years ago, I went through a really bad divorce and nervous breakdown, and it really changed me quite a bit. I went through a lot of therapy. I mean, even got electric shock therapy. I mean, I went through a lot, and it really did change me.
Yeah.
So summing myself up now is a little bit different than I would have probably even just a year ago. I'm an introvert. If you ask most of my friends, they don't see me. My best friend is, like I said, is from Belfast, but he lives in LA, and you know, we talk every 3 days on the phone. Most of my friends don't see me that often. I'm a dad who has 2 adorable kids, a 4-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. Been married twice. I'm a complicated person. I like to think a lot. I really believe a lot in civil rights for all people. But I also like to think critically and make sure that I'm not responding to clickbait or just what's in the news, that I like to look in and research things. Recently, I guess for the past few years, I've really fallen in love with philosophy, not just theology. So I like to read a lot. I'm a messy guy. It takes a lot for me to keep my house clean, keep my car clean. It's like, who am I? I'm a dark person. I believe in a lot of stuff, but I think there's also a lot of contradictions in my life that I'm learning to accept, more of in a Hegelian sense of the term, of contradictions, because it's things that you can't really necessarily change, but you learn to live with and accept and move forward. I suffer from depression, which hasn't been really bad lately, but it does come up and rear its ugly head every now and then. And I get a little nervous about that. I love punk rock music, especially from the 70s and 80s. I love hip hop. I like to think, and I like to challenge other people to think. I think I'm a funny person. At least I have a good laugh with Pete, my best mate. And so I don't know if that explains who I am or not. I mean, I feel very deeply. I feel extremely deeply, to the point where sometimes it's troubling.
Yeah.
So I work through that, but it also allows me to think more critically and come up with better talks and better communication, and keeps me inspired to want to write and communicate and inspire people. I'd like to be, I think it was Tupac who said, I might not change the world, but maybe I'll put a spark into the person who does,
Yeah.
And that's the type of thing I'd like to do with my work, is just put a spark into people's minds and lives to change things, make a difference if I can't do it myself.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask Christelle a question.
Oh, okay.
Christelle, I know that you are extremely nervous now because Jay is a person who means a lot to you and inspired you in all sorts of ways. Could you briefly say why he's inspired you and why you were so keen to have him on the show?
Oh, you want me to go deep? This is good. We're gonna go there. Oh, okay. Jay Bakker, why does he inspire me? I'm gonna be super honest and truthful here. And so we're gonna go into stuff that scares me too, because I don't necessarily like to pop on and talk about religion and where I came from and all that. But there was a time where my family sat and watched, what was it, the Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker show? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was called the Jim and Tammy Show and the PTL Club. It
PTL
a lot of names. Yeah,
which is funny because I'm actually filming in my parents' house right now. So we would sit in my parents' house and watch the show. And of course, I grew up AG, Assemblies of God.
Me too.
Yeah, and so that's a whole other level. Every Assembly of God. What was that? I know you don't know what that means. Is it's a denomination here. It's a denomination here in American evangelical denomination that tends to be pretty conservative and fundamental and Pentecostal. So we grew up watching Jim and Tammy Faye, and every once in a while Jay and his sister would come on. And eventually I actually ended up going to the same university for 1 year as Jay's parents, North Central University. So I have a little bit of history there, did a little ministry there, but that is why I watched Jay for so long. And he inspired me because I watched, I'm gonna kind of plug you here, Jay. I watched The Fall to Grace. The Fall to Grace. That's his book that he wrote. And as someone about Jay's age, watching that and going, my God, this is what Christians will do to someone who makes a mistake or does something. Wow. But watching Jay live his life so open, at least very recently, so transparently, and being willing to talk about things that are hard topics, that inspires me. He inspired me with his book, Fall to Grace. He inspires me he just keeps going and keeps getting up. And he inspires me with the fact that he talks about mental health issues so openly. That's not always talked about in the church. And so that gives me hope. And just seeing how he honors his parents very publicly, that inspires me. The way he honors
you.
other people very publicly, that inspires me, because not everyone does that. And I'm assuming in Jay's shoes, having the public eye on him for quite some time, it's hard having the public eye and having scrutiny sometimes. So for all those reasons and more, he inspires me. But I think primarily how he talks about grace and hope is just something that's refreshing, especially coming from a church background. So I'll stop there. This isn't about me, it's about Jay. Jay, I'm going to ask you, who inspires you? Who
inspires me?
Who inspires you? Who's your inspiration?
It's a good question. I have quite a few folks who inspire me. I'd say probably I'm very Paulinian in my reading of the Bible. But actual Paul, I do have an issue with post Paul or pseudo Paul, whatever, like fake Paul, just, the issues you have with the Bible. But Paul, especially Galatians, inspires me. If I could just do that for the rest of my life, that book, I would. Let's see. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of my biggest inspirations. He has been for years. I've lived in Atlanta for a long time, and reading Martin Luther King's work. And I don't think most people do read his work or listen to his sermons. And when you listen to his sermons and you read his work, you realize this is a man that could have been anything. He probably would have been one of the greatest philosophers of our time if he had decided to go into philosophy. And he's an amazing theologian. He's a brilliant man. And he has taught me a lot. He's created a roadmap for nonviolence and for loving your enemies that no one has ever done. And like I've said before, Jesus told us to love our enemies, and maybe he showed us a little bit, but really King has really drew the perfect roadmap on how to love one's enemies. Paul Tillich is a hero of mine. I really like Paul Tillich a lot. I don't completely understand him, but I like him, and he inspires me. And then I have things like certain records, like Inflammable Materials by Stiff Little Fingers out of Belfast. That inspires me. John Lydon from the Sex Pistols. His life inspires me to see how his work ethic and his belief to be who he is and to be true to himself inspires me. Chuck D from Public Enemy inspires me. Johnny Cash. So I feel like musicians often inspire me, sometimes more than theologians. But also Pete Rollins, who's my best friend, who I've mentioned a few times now. He inspires me. His work inspires me, and it's great because we were buddies for so long, and then I kind of got into his work in the past few years, and found a lot of inspiration there. So those are just a few of my inspirations. I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it even more, I could come up with a lot. And my mom, I think my mom has inspired me because she just lived love, even when it maybe didn't fit into the small amount of theology that she had. She just continued to live love, and she was never a theologian or anything like that, but she really lived it. And that inspires me to, she had this book called It's Gotta Be Me. And I like that idea.
So I'm going to ask Ike a deep question, I suppose, or maybe not. But if, the backstory is, of course, that your father was prosecuted for, I think it was fraud of some kind.
Yeah, wire fraud and mail fraud.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think your life would be like now if that had not happened? And do you think you are better off being the person you are now, or you would have been better off being the other person? If that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
do you think that?
Like kind of what if we would have stayed?
Yeah. Right. Would you rather be the person you are now, or the person you would have been if none of that had come out? Or, well, you could say if that had never happened, if they'd never committed the fraud, is one option, or they'd never been caught committing the fraud, or whatever.
Well,
happened.
Either way,
I don't know.
I don't know. Be honest with you, I feel like my parents did put a lot of foundation in me to love people and to be very honest, you know, and not fall for a lot of BS. And so I think that was going to be probably a good guide for me. But honestly, the fame and the money, I don't know if that would have changed me. And so the life I've lived has been full of a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, starting at a very young age and continuing. But I realized life is pain. You know, pain is a part of life, more so than happiness. So I'm sure there would have been great pain the other way too. But you know, I mean, it would have been better. I'd probably be able to pay my bills a lot better. Probably wouldn't have written a lot more books or had somebody else write books for me. So I don't know. I'm happy with who I am, and I don't think I would go back and change it. You know, especially having kids now, and you know, it's like, even though my marriage didn't end well, I'd still, those kids are. I'm glad I had those kids. I'm glad I had that moment, and you just realize that the suffering is part of also the beauty of the romance and the happiness and the hope and the story that you're in. So just kind of living the story you find yourself in. So I think I prefer to be who I am now. Yeah.
Your friend Joel Grover is asking, how is your dad recovering? How's he doing? He got ill recently. How's he doing now?
He seems to be doing pretty well. Honestly, we don't talk very much, but I send him photos of my my kids, and I'm pretty sure Joel's actually related to me. But he's doing better. He's doing well. He had a stroke and he didn't lose any ability to move or talk or anything, so they caught it in time.
Good. Jay, you're a father of two.
Yes.
What has fatherhood taught you? What is the greatest lesson fatherhood has taught you, or even what have your children taught you?
Patience, and not in like a horrible way, but just like, you have to live life and you have to make hard decisions and sacrifice certain things. And I believe my theology, my philosophy and all that is kind of a type of art that I do. And I believe that I live my own life, and I really am stubborn not to want to live my life the way other people think I should. But when you have kids, there's certain things you have to do, and you have to live your life that way in order to get them to where they need to go. So it's taught me a lot about that, a lot about love. I mean, and they're hilarious. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I can't put one thing on it. It's just what they've taught me to do what I need to do. And that, some sacrifices in life are way worth it. And, and not that they're sacrifices, like they're hard sacrifices to make or anything, but they do require, doing things differently. I mean, I would probably be living somewhere far away if my children weren't in Minnesota. So, I live in the cold because I love my kids.
Yes. Oh, I don't miss those winter days freezing in Minnesota. What is something that you really hope to instill into your children?
Compassion and love, and they seem to see that, especially my son. I mean, he's older, so I mean, he's just such a sweetheart and seems to feel a lot. I just want my kids to be compassionate and loving and forgiving towards people. That's what I hope, is that they're just compassionate human beings, and they realize that they can do whatever they want, and that I'll always be there for them no matter what. I think, sometimes I see my son pull away a little bit when he gets sad, almost gets bashful, and I've sat down with him and tried to say, hey, you can always come to me when you're sad or you're feeling nervous, or if someone hurt your feelings, you can come and tell me and we can talk about it. I'll talk to you about it, so please be open with that. So I just want them to be comfortable with who they are and know that they're always going to be loved in that. And hopefully that they'll learn from me to love others. I've honestly tried to keep religion a bit out of their lives right now because being raised in it, sometimes you wonder if it was you were just brainwashed and indoctrinated. So I just want to kind of give the kids a chance that I didn't have.
Yeah.
Okay. So reading your Wikipedia page, I did that much and research, nothing else. It says that you've got quite a different take now on Christianity to obviously the background you came from. If you were, it's hard to ask this question without being blasphemous or some other thing, but let's say you were tasked by God or some other person to update a lot of the rules that were in the Bible and the rest of it. What are the major changes that you would introduce to make people with Christianity apply Christianity to the 21st century, so to speak?
I'd probably edit the Bible. I'd probably remove a few books of the Bible, especially the pastoral epistles, because I honestly think they're forgeries. You know, I probably put in a verse or two about think before you judge or think before you speak. You know, a little bit more critical thinking in there. But no, I've never thought about that. What would I do? I mean, to me, it's just a tool that I use in my life and my work. So, I mean, I like the idea of loving your neighbor and your enemy as yourself. Yeah. I just think that people always find a way to get rid of it and find a group to scapegoat. You know, I mean, I left the conservative world because I felt like they always, you know, scapegoated people and were so judgmental and so harsh, you know, and now I've spent a lot of my life being a liberal and a Democrat and all that stuff, most of all my adult life. And now I'm seeing that hypocrisy there, you know, now I'm seeing the scapegoating there, that they scapegoat all the conservatives, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like we've just, you know, you just change what you want to believe, but you don't change anything else, you know, like, you know, it's like new atheists, you know, it's like sometimes a new atheists are kind of assholes, you know, and they're angry at conservative Christians who are kind of assholes. You know what I mean? It's like, be honest with you guys, the whole asshole thing kind of turns me off. You know, I mean, I'd like to maybe figure out a better way to do things. Like if I'm going to leave Christianity, I'm not going to stay in those same legalistic. I just don't like legalism in any sense of the term. Yeah. And I don't like liberal legalism or conservative legalism. You know, I'm not into cancel culture. You know, it's all that stuff just seems to really bother me and seems to not require a lot of critical thinking. And so that's tough for me. So the whole love your enemy, love your neighbor type of thing, you know, it's like, I love that, but people keep finding reasons not to. It's like people want, like I always say, grace is like anarchy. You know, because grace is for everybody and there's no rules or regulations on who receives grace, you know, and try to remind people that. And the whole idea of loving your enemies. And like I said earlier on is like Martin Luther King always saw his enemies as victims. He never saw them as people who needed to be destroyed. He saw them as people who needed to be healed and restored and re-educated. You know, so I try to live my life. I just don't feel like I have enemies. I mean, I have people who don't like me, but it's like I don't see them as enemies. I see them as sometimes more as sparring partners or people that maybe they can change me or I can change them. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So the Bible's a hard thing to change, you know?
Yeah. I think when people stop talking, that's when most of the trouble starts happening, when they start saying, I won't talk to you, or actually stop listening, I suppose. People often stop listening before they stop talking. So
if you could have dinner with 3 people around the world, an inspiring conversation, who would you have dinner with, Jay, to have those deep philosophical conversations that you love to have?
That's tough.
You can shorten it, you can lengthen it.
I mean, I feel kind of lucky, you know what I mean? I feel like I've got good folks in my life, you know what I mean? I feel like every time like me and Pete sit down, we either have a laugh and a crack or like talk about something deep and amazing. you know, maybe one of Martin Luther King's daughter. I don't know. I mean, some of the guys who were in the civil rights movement would be really encouraging. I don't know. Like I've been lucky enough to like meet authors that I like and actually sit down and talk to them. And then the people who I'd really like to sit down and talk with are dead. You know what I mean? Like Paul Tillich, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
You know, people like that are gone. So I don't know why I'm having a hard time answering that question, but
yeah,
I don't know.
So let's lighten it up. You're a deep thinker. What do you like to do for fun? If you can relax, what is it that you want to do? What do you do for fun?
It's funny because I like a lot of times I like to read for fun. You know, I like to hang out with a friend. You know, I don't know. I mean, I talk to Pete on the phone. I'm not real. I don't have a high thing of like, I have fun, you know. I think that's a problem for a lot of people in my life is that, you know, they want to go out and do things and have fun. And, you know, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'll go sit in the corner at the party. You know, like I like to watch a movie, you know, and that's fun. I like to listen to music. That's fun, you know? So yeah.
You talked a bit about music before and how it inspires you. Name a couple bands that you are listening to right now.
Stiff Little Fingers.
What are you listening to right now?
Well, that's what's in my headphones.
During COVID.
Stiff Little Fingers, Public Enemy. Let's see, who else am I listening to right now? Fine Young Cannibals, but not for inspiration, just because I like them. I've always loved U2 and the Beach Boys and bands like that, like kind of been timeless. Social Distortion is another band that's been really timeless for me. You know, trying to think like, David Bowie. I've been listening to a lot of David Bowie lately. Like just like I've just realized like my Spotify is just full of David Bowie. Like every other song is David Bowie right now. So well, you're in a lot of that.
You're in Minnesota. Prince. Are you a Prince fan?
Oh, Prince. I saw Prince when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
In concert, which, you know, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, I love Prince. I mean, I have every Prince album ever made, every, you know, answer machine message he's ever left. You know, I love Prince. Yeah. So Prince is amazing. You know, Elvis Costello too. I like Elvis Costello a lot as well. So yeah.
Good. Tim, I'm looking at you because I don't want to take over here.
Well, no, I was going to ask Christelle, you mentioned something about a film with Elton John doing something in it going to be happening.
Let's let Jay talk about it.
Okay, well, there is a film coming out, and it was probably supposed to come out the end of this year, but I don't know with the whole COVID thing if it will be coming out or not. And it's based off a documentary that was done on my mom called The Eyes of Tammy Faye. And so it's the title of the movie. The film is the same. And, you know, it's got, it's got, what is the actor's name playing my dad? The guy who played the second Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield's playing my dad. And I'm losing names right now. And I'm on my phone talking to you, so I can't text anybody. I can't search. But yeah, so they're doing a big film about my parents, and then Elton John is working on a musical about my mom.
Okay.
So there'll be a feature film and a musical, which is really wild because you think that people would be tired of the story, you know? And it seems to be something that just doesn't die and doesn't go away, you know? And with a film like that size, you know, it seems like, you know, it will be more of an international story, and probably people in London and things like that will know more about my parents because of Jessica Chastain, who this is her passion project, who's playing my mother, is putting out. And so, more people will probably know the story of my family than they do now. And a whole new generation will be introduced to them, which I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but it'll be something. And it's one of those things, like, I feel like I can never escape. I can never, like, kind of just bridge my own way. But it's part of my story. So, and what I do is I talk about my story and I talk about life, and that's how I use theology and philosophy, is I intertwine it through stories and through being personal with people and being transparent and talking about mental health and talking about pain and talking about hope and talking about grace. So I think, it'll just be hopefully another tool to help me do what I do. Yeah.
I mean, your mom was very inspiring. How do you feel about this big Elton John production being made about her?
Well, I hope I get to meet Elton John, to be honest with you. That would be really cool. I hope to get my sister to work on the musical. I think that would be really cool. Because my sister's a great musician, a great singer, and too, it's like, I kind of hope that they would help out. They would ask us to help out with these projects a little bit more, so they're at least true to who they are, to my parents. But yeah, so I mean, I'm excited. I think my mom would be excited. I think my dad's less so excited because, he's usually drawn in as kind of not the bad guy. That's usually said for Jerry Falwell, but my dad's always not everybody's favorite, and I feel like feels like he's just been through the ringer over and over and over again in his life. And I think part of him would like to not do that, but unfortunately he's got opinions and they're not always that popular. So,
So what do you think in general makes a good story, and why do you think your parents' story resonates so much with people? Is it because of the religious themes, or
well, I mean, that's
just a good story in general? That's
some of it, but I think that it touches within our psyche the fact that we all have contradictions, and that these are people who are successful at religion, yet at the same time failed, and were mockeries and not seen as religion. And I think people are interested by the fact of that kind of that idea of it. I mean, so many people watched my parents in the 80s. It's insane. I mean, it's just like, I was reading a book about John Lennon, and he would sit down and watch my parents on television. I mean, freaking John Lennon, and Elton John and people like that who seem to have invested in my parents and found some sort of encouragement or hope or something from these televangelists, which is bizarre. But I think there's something unique about that. And I think that's what draws people in. And I think too, my mother's legacy of loving the LGBTQ community and everything that she did, and interviewing a man with AIDS back in the 80s. And she was just a fascinating human being. And I think that people are drawn to that. And, and I mean, of course, everybody loves Scandal as well. I mean, people seem to be obsessed with it no matter what it is. But I think there's something that that touches deeper within us. And I think it also, it scares people, like, well, what maybe I could become that, or could that happen to me? I don't think it's spoken out loud, but my parents, when they started doing children's ministry, didn't set out to be, have an empire, it just happened,
Yeah. Do you think that's why you live your life so transparent? Is that why do you live your life so transparent, so openly, for the world?
I honestly think if I'd probably gone to school for theology or philosophy, I might be less open. But I dropped out of high school and went back and got a GED, and I am all self-taught. So I read all the books and had to do all the stuff on my own. I've been and taken courses at schools and seminaries and things like that, but I've never gotten a degree or anything. So I think for me, it's just part of how I do my work. And I feel like that's kind of the power of my work, is by being transparent with people. And I'm like inspired. Another person who inspires me is Henry Rollins. and he was the singer of Black Flag and the Rollins Band and things like that. But now he goes around and does spoken word. And it's not really comedy and it's not really drama, but it's just kind of he just talks about his life and has these great stories, and he's a storyteller. And I think there's something that draws me to that, but I'm not a storyteller. But I feel like I'm able to share my life with people, and I feel like it's the gift that makes what I do special is being transparent. And it's very comfortable for me to be transparent because I grew up on television. I went to therapists, a lot of my life. And I just hungered, and as a kid, with around religious people, around people in school, around authority figures and all this stuff, for somebody just to be freaking transparent with me and to be real. I felt like everybody was lying, like every authority figure was full of shit, and like they only got this image. And I was just dying for some humanity. And so I think what happened is I just kind of went the opposite way and just became like this haphazardly human, as one of my sponsors in AA once called me, haphazardly human. I just became like this haphazardly human being that's, kind of a mess. And I'm just doing my best to be. And so I use what I know, and that's, I know me.
Yeah. Do you find freedom in that? Do you feel more free being transparent? And of course, I'm kind of using that lingo, I guess, I got from religion. But do you feel more free being transparent and being able to have that mask off and being able to be completely openly you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm 99% transparent or 98% transparent. There's obviously things that I don't share with people, and try to keep my life private, especially as I have other people in my life who don't want that. But does it make me more comfortable? I don't know. I mean, sometimes it does, but then there's times where I'm around, like, when I attend, events where there's philosophers and I'm sitting down at a table, like, when I was in Belfast and I was sitting at a table with like movie directors and philosophers and really well-educated people. And I was stoked to be at that table. I mean, it was really incredible. But at the same time, there was a part of me that's like, well, I wish I could talk more about, philosophy or, in the way that they do. I want more of that. I would like to have more of that. So there's always, that kind of like, yeah, I'm comfortable with where I'm at, but I have a lot of friends who have doctorates, and so, there's times where you kind of feel like, oh, I'm the, I'm the bin lid out of the group,
So earlier on, I was making you basically Jesus too and getting you to rewrite the Bible. So I thought I might as well carry on the trend. And
Okay.
I think I asked somebody else this recently, but if suddenly everybody in the world decided Jay Bakker should be the world dictator tomorrow, what are the biggest things that you would like to change about the world that you would then be able to do? What are the things you think should change in the world in the next couple of years?
I think people should be able to make living wages. I think hungry people should be able to eat. I mean, it's just cliche shit, I think people should be able to get education. I think, obviously racism. I mean, you can put all those things in laws and it doesn't change anything. That's the thing. So if I'm the dictator of the world, I still can't be like, make it happen. I can be like, it's the law of that, but I think better education, for the world, in terms of just feeding people, people eating. Like, how could we get people to eat? I think, capitalism is kind of screwy, and I don't think it really works for most people, even though we don't, but it makes us think it does. And I would like to say, like, hey, let's pull the curtain on that and take a look at that. Maybe there's a better way for us to live as a world. But that would be way too much pressure, and I would fold, and the world would be a mess, and then I'd have to like hire people to come in and clean it. And it would be a big. I'd have to have a really good cabinet,
I mean,
or maybe, you should just. Who would you hire as your replacement?
As my replacement? Oh goodness! Everybody I would hire as my replacement is dead.
So that shows something.
So maybe I would just ask Bernie Sanders to come in and do it for me. Unfortunately, I'm way in too many American politics in my head, but I like Bernie Sanders. He seems like an okay guy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd ask him to come in and run it, and then pick somebody else, because he's old, so he wouldn't have it that long. So just like, come in, run it, and I'm gonna go. That island I decided was Jay Island. I'm gonna go there.
I mean, at this point, Jay, you can't mess anything up. We'll be.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. It's an insane time to be alive right now. It's insane.
I mean, it feels like we're living in the middle of the Twilight Zone, honestly. How are you dealing with COVID as a pastor? I mean, how has this changed your church? Has it changed it? I think you've been primarily online for quite a few years, but.
Yeah, I mean, we're just online now. We're not meeting.
Okay.
I don't see anybody at all. My kids, their daycare is in a place near old folks' homes. And so, I just have to be careful. Everything, we just have to be careful. So I don't see a lot of people. That's tough. Making ends meet is tough right now because everybody's not doing great financially, and having a tough time. So yeah, I mean, you just live, read books and get, have a few friends that you're close to. And, I'm like everybody else, I'm tired of it, but I'm not tired of it where I'm just going to pretend like it's not there, but yeah, it's starting to wear on me a little bit, and it's hard not to get angry, like, and just want to force everybody to put on a mask. So 2021, we can go to concerts and events and speak. I can go speak again, Yeah. I'd like to speak more, and do more things. And usually I travel, once or at least twice a year to Northern Ireland. And I would like to do that. And I didn't get to do that this year. And so, I'd like to have life back. I've had to train myself to study at home, because usually I study at coffee shops.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been kind of tough. I don't feel like my talks have been as sharp because I haven't been able to sit and, drink a cup of coffee and have some food and read. I have to read at home, and my bed's at home, and my bed's really tempting to just sleep the day away.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then when I'm with my kids, I mean, studying is nearly impossible. So,
yeah, I imagine. What are you writing right now? Are you writing a book?
I'm dyslexic, so I don't write much down.
Mm-hmm.
I have kind of an idea for 2 or 3 books in my head right now. My first book was when I was 23, which is ridiculous that you write your biography at 23, but I did. And I like to do that, a follow-up to that. I think that would be interesting, especially going through my mother's death and different things like that. And the mental breakdown. And I don't know if I want to do those separately or, talking about mental health, but I think it could be a good combined book. And I also want to write a book on punk theology and what is the theology that comes out of punk rock, especially the early years of punk rock, and do that. And I'm also talking about working on a few projects, working on a documentary about my parents in the 80s called An American Contradiction, and doing a documentary with Helen. I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep it low. Just doing a documentary and about my folks, and then also doing maybe some film work for documentary work on punk rock as well.
Mm-hmm.
So seems like it's my question, and I haven't thought of a question. I'm going to ask you the famous free animals question.
Okay.
Which is my alternative to asking people what they do, because when I go to networking and events, so many people will say, well, what do you do? And you say, well, I write books or whatever. And then that's the end of the conversation. But instead, I ask people this question, which is, Jay, if you had to describe yourself using 3 animals, which 3 animals would you pick?
A turtle, a wombat, and a cat.
Ooh. Why the wombat?
because
turtle, actually.
well, turtles are slow and steady,
Yeah.
and they live a long time, but they're consistent. A wombat lives in the tree trunks, and and they have strong backbones, and that's how they get their food, is by boom, 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 getting things trapped into their little tree trunks that they live in. And so they're really cute. So I love them, and so I'd like to be cute and have a small enclosed place to live in. And a cat is, obviously they get to nap all day and be snotty, but be loved for being that. Like, oh, those cats are just, they're so they just, they're aloof, but it's okay for them. So and usually when you're an introvert, everyone thinks you're an aloof asshole, especially if you're like a speaker and a writer. Then they just think, oh, he thinks he's too good for anybody, when it's like, no, I'm just actually kind of scared to talk to you, or it will zap me of all energy. I want to talk to you, I'm just nervous.
So.
Yeah. It's interesting, that question, in as much as it shows that you haven't got any problem with your identity as such, because some people are like, they have no idea. They honestly have no idea what they would say for the three animals, and then you basically get one animal, and then a little while later you get another animal. And you were just like, yeah, turtle, wombat, cat. And I'm like,
I love when you ask that question, Tim. We get so many answers. I love it.
I was like, great white porcupine, platypus. That would be really weird, right?
Maybe that's next week.
I don't know. You know what? The animals tend to change every time we ask this.
But that's the whole thing about, there are no right or wrong answers to a question like that. It's just a conversation starter.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Actually, so let's flip on. What is the most interesting question that somebody's asked you in the last year? Just one of those random questions I like.
That one, Tim. That one, the animal.
Yeah, the animal question actually, animal question is really pretty interesting. I don't know. It's like I find conversations more interesting than particularly one question. But people I'll ask, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Honestly, I don't feel like anyone's asked me a question in the past year that I've been like, oh, great question, except for that animal question. That was pretty good. That was really different. I've done some cool interviews with people, and had some cool conversations with folks. I like to answer, I like to talk about theology. I like to talk about, what I believe. I like challenging questions. So, I don't know. I'm sure there is one, but my brain isn't really grasping it right now. I apologize. Being stuck on this house all day it's getting to me. Let me out.
I think everybody's got a little bit loopy, to use an old English phrase, during lockdown. During lockdown, yeah. One thing we haven't talked about, and maybe Christelle is a better person to ask the question, but is the whole mental health aspect. I'm not really quite sure. I could just say, talk about mental health, but I'm not quite sure. What would you say is the biggest mental health thing that people aren't talking about that they should be talking about now? That's the best I can do in terms of thinking. I mean,
depression and suicide. I took a bottle of pills. I thought about it and tried to figure out different ways to take my life, and I'm a bit ashamed by it because of my children are the only reason of that. But I wish people would talk more about that openly. And depression just doesn't give a damn about anything.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think health insurance is so important is like I'm on basically what they call Obamacare here in Minneapolis. And it's strange because the president right now is trying to get rid of it, and I would lose my insurance and not be able to get my help that I need. And I think people need mental health help. you know, in the, I guess in the 70s and 80s when they closed down all the mental wards was because they were horrible. But at the same time, a lot of those people got put out on the streets and became homeless, and you know, and can't have jobs and things like that. That there was more support for people in the world who are dealing with that. Because when you're going through that type of darkness, you can't see anything else, or you can't feel anything else, and it becomes extremely hard to talk. It becomes extremely hard to think. It becomes extremely hard to care about anything, and at that time, the thing you probably should be caring about most is yourself anyway, because you it's like the air mask in the airplane. You know, you can't help anybody else at that point unless you help yourself. And so I wish people would talk more about suicide and depression. I think it's just something that we you know, I think it's like when somebody you know, when a white person shoots up a group of people, they're always said it's their mental health, or they're mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's like, well, there's so many more people who suffer from other types of mental health issues, and usually it's, you know, depression of some sort, or self-compulsion. I had depression and panic attacks and obsessive compulsive disorder and a few different things.
Mm-hmm.
But the depression really put me in a bad place. And it's hard to be a parent. It's hard to hold a job. It's hard to do anything when you're in that. And yeah, I don't want that darkness ever again. I get scared when I start to feel the darkness. You know, when I start to feel that darkness come around. I'm just like, I don't want to go there again. And I have tools, like I did DBT, which is dialectic behavior therapy, and that helped a lot. Mm-hmm. Gave me tools to deal with the stuff. But, you know, that people would have the ability to get these tools. You know, I mean, I know like in the UK, you guys have health insurance and things like that. I don't know how it works with mental health, but, you know, and that it wouldn't be seen as weird, or people wouldn't be like, oh, poor baby, you know, like, oh, you're whining about your mental health. Like, to me, I'm like, just hand the person a gun. Like, if you really want to make fun of their mental health or say that they're whining, you know, and you really want to make someone who's already feels like a complete piece of shit feel even worse about themselves, just, you know, go ahead and do that. But know that you're playing a part in their destruction. And I think that's one of the things I hate so much about, like, if there's something I hate about social media, it's that type of insensitivity, like, grow up, or like, oh, those prisoners deserve to be there, or this like lack of empathy that we have, you know, and this self-righteousness that, you know, on either side, it just makes me really, really, if something gets me angry, that's something that just really gets me angry, is when people are not willing to either sympathize. And I know empathy is harder, but if you have empathy, that they're not empathizing, or they're not able to sympathize and think that maybe I could be in that position. Yeah. You know, maybe I could be there. So I think I wish there was people who are, you know, more comfortable and were careful about how they responded, and that people would respond out with, how can we help, or how can I help, or just shut up and not say anything. You know, just if you have a freaking bad comment, just go argue at like a politician or something you don't like. I don't know. Just leave the mentally ill alone or help them.
Yeah. What pulled you out, Jay, of that you talked about the 2-year struggle that you had? What pulled you out?
Good therapy, you know, my kids, and having people who empathized around me. My buddy Caleb, who's like becoming a pastor and is my co-pastor right now, my assistant pastor at Revolution. You know, I mean, I would come in and he would just see me and he would start crying because he just saw this brokenness on me. Mm-hmm. And he would cry, and it made a huge impact on me that, why is Caleb crying? Because he sees me broken. I mean, I understood it, but it was just one of those things where it was like he was handing me like this license to be broken. Yeah. You know, like, it's okay to, I know you're more broken than you're letting on. Mm-hmm. You know, I know that the pain is much worse than you appear to have. Mm-hmm. And my mate Pete Rollins, you know, I'm lucky to have a best friend that I really like and who believes in me. And he also is not afraid to tell me the truth and really hard truths at times that, sometimes sting, to be honest with you. But he believed in me when a lot of people were telling me to not move on. Like, I had a lot of people that if I told you who they were, you'd be surprised, who are basically saying, go get a job, quit the ministry, get your life together, and just move on. And Pete said, no. I said, well, Pete, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know what I believe anymore. He said, it doesn't matter. He just keeps doing what you're doing. You've got the concept of grace. You've got it. Just keep going. Just keep moving forward. Don't stop. And he just encouraged me to continue to do what I've done. And I've done it for like 25 years. And everybody else was like, oh, well, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do that. Everybody has a damn opinion. And I guess he had one too, but his opinion is just stay true to who you are and what your art is and what your purpose is. And he believed in me. And, here's somebody who's has a doctorate in philosophy, and a proper doctorate at that, and it's like, have somebody like that believe in you.
Yeah.
It really, I felt abandoned by most of everyone in my life, except for just a handful of people. Yeah. And he talked me through it. And I honestly believe I'm alive today because he believed in me and believed in my work. And I know that it seems ridiculous, but like when you ask what I do for fun, I want to be like, well, like I really do enjoy reading philosophy and struggling through it and theology, I really do enjoy what I do. I feel really lucky to do what I do, and so to me, it doesn't have to be an either or. And so, having somebody to believe in your work is, it means a lot to have people who we do this thing called Meet Your Congregation on Revolution, which is a separate podcast that we do. Mm-hmm. And we talk to congregant members from all over the place so people can know each other. Mm-hmm. Having people tell me like, oh yeah, well, I just came to Revolution in the past year, and heard you going through all this horrible stuff, and it just made me want to be there. And your transparency drew me in, or your suffering. And I'm going like, man, I thought I was going to lose my whole church. Yeah. Because I just didn't have the money to hire somebody to come in and preach for me, and I don't, I haven't been that social in Minnesota, to be that honest with you. So I don't know that many people to do that for me. And so I just kept doing it anyway in the midst of my brokenness. I was in the depths of hell. And then people saying like that kept me going, or that was why I believe in what you're doing. And that made a huge difference. I feel like the congregation, probably I don't talk enough about, but they really carried me through. And I don't think they realized like the part that they played, just the people who listen, the listeners of Revolution, played, and by just listening and, by letting me know hey, we're listening and we're here for you and we love you and you're encouraging us. And, and so I guess, knowing that you're doing your work and you're doing your work well, at least to some people, keeps you going.
To have a place where we can show up and kind of have that sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Where we can be ourselves. Finally. I don't know. I think that's encouraging for a lot of us. And
to have that be your church and he be the pastor is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty like, hey, I don't know if I believe in God today and I want to die, okay. I showed up before and said, I don't have anything for anybody today. Can we just hang out and sit down and talk? And they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, it actually sounds kind of cool for the church, to be honest.
Well, my Easter sermon was the crucifixion. I said, because I don't have any room for resurrection in my life. I said, so we'll talk about the crucifixion for Easter. So yeah, it's a bit dark.
That's good. Tim, I'm looking at you again. Otherwise, I'm gonna close it out with.
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about most things, haven't we? Is there anything that you were expecting us to ask you that we haven't asked you?
No. I don't really have a lot of expectations when it comes to interviews. I've done so many that you just kind of go in and Like it's an adventure, you know. It's like people sometimes want to send me questions ahead of time, and I'm like, okay, but it's just more fun when it's kind of off, you know, when I'm hearing it for the first time, you know. It's always fun.
I used to send everybody the 5 questions I would ask them in the interview, but it's I mean, to some extent it means you've got some structure to the interview, but you miss out on a lot of the fun sort of off the cuff questions, really. So
yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, you don't really want like. The worst is when they send you a list about 15 questions written out, and you're like,
yeah. Or people always ask me, like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? You know, I'm like, no.
Yeah. Well, no, you should write that episode with the monkey and just like,
yeah. Let's not talk about that.
Let's keep it out.
Or religion. And then we're fine.
No politics, no
religion, or
my parents. Mental health. Go for
it. Tell us about your favorite tattoo. Actually, that can be a last question. Your favorite tattoo, Jay, and why?
They change quite often, to be honest with you. My favorite tattoo is not. I was in a really dark time, and I got "Life Ends" tattooed on my hands. But it's also the idea that to live life before you die, you know, because I think a lot of times Christians are hoping to
live in denial.
Yeah, or they're looking for the glory land. You know, like we're gonna go to heaven one day, and we'll all be happy. And I'm like, well, let's just live, see what happens afterwards. That one, and then when I was in Belfast about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer than a year ago, I went and got a tattoo at 5:30 in the morning because I had a plane to catch, and so I couldn't believe that this artist said, "I will show up at 5:30 in the morning and tattoo you." So, and then I asked Pete. I asked Pete. I said, "Hey, will you take me to the tattoo parlor?" He's like, "Oh, mate, that's too early." You know, I'm like, "All right, well, I'll just take a car." And then I asked him to bring me a coffee and a lemon loaf, and he brought me a coffee but forgot the lemon loaf. The reason I remember that him forgetting the lemon loaf is because this is the tattoo I got. I'll see if I can get it on screen. But can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It says Pete. So I got the 2 fingers with Pete's name underneath, to give you an idea of how our friendship is. And so "Piss Off, Pete" basically is my tattoo, and it's my own hand. And so I hid the tattoo from him the whole time I was getting it. I kept telling him to go look around the tattoo parlor and things like that because he showed up. And so he saw the tattoo with his name on it, and he went, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the lemon cake." So I thought that was the story kind of makes it even better. So yeah.
I mean, you got a name tattooed on you. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and usually it destroys. Like I had my first wife's name tattooed on me, and I was like, I'm never gonna get another woman's name tattooed on me. And then I got Pete's name tattooed, and I'm like, oh, this is probably gonna kill our friendship. But we both have too much dirt on each other to really. We kind of have to be friends for the rest of our lives at this point.
That's awesome.
We both know where the bodies are buried. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you could move to Ireland, would you? Well, I guess he's in LA now. You would. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess he's in LA now, you said, but
he is. Yeah. But I would love, like, if we could move to Belfast and start some sort of like community of thinking. It would be pretty amazing. And I love Belfast. If I could live anywhere in the world, I would. I mean, maybe I'll retire there one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, if you don't have any more questions, we'll close it out and ask Jade to tell us where everyone can find him online. Where can we find you? Where can we go to your church? Where can we be in contact online?
Okay, it's revolutionchurch.com is where you can services. The services are on every media. Revolution Church is on Spotify, iTunes, and all the other ones that I don't know of. But we're on them all, thanks to my buddy Caleb. I'm on Twitter, which I have been for a long time. And I'm also on Instagram, and I love Instagram. It's a lot of fun. I probably spend too much time on Instagram. I do spend too much time on Instagram. Okay. I don't know why. It's an obsession. I I do put a lot of stories up on Instagram. So if you go to the stories, if you follow me, you'll get more from my stories than you probably do my actual Instagram feed. I really like that. So, and I'm just Jay Bakker. Luckily, I've got 2 Ks in Baker, so I got it. So I'm Jay Bakker on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook as well, Jay Bakker on Facebook, and Revolution Church is on Facebook, and we do services live, 11 a.m. Central, on Facebook right now, and we probably will continue to do that and maybe do YouTube eventually. I think we do have a YouTube channel, actually. I'm out of the loop. So we have all those. And Revolution Church is also on Twitter as well. So yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and any areas you're looking to do podcasts, and that you can hear the Meet the Congregations on there as well. So those are where to find us. And
Tim, are you coming on, just kidding, on Sunday?
you can ask questions. We do Q&A right after, so we keep that in there so you can trust me. I've had pushback on things I never thought I'd have pushback on, so it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Jay, thank you for being here. Means a lot.
No, you're welcome. Yeah.
Tim,
thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks for having me.
Noah, Margaret, Tim, all for commenting and being here, and everyone watching. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.